Hey guys, this is Dalton at Ironwood Strength Conditioning, and I wanted to go ahead and make a video this beautiful Christmas Eve and go over standard lifts, overload variations, and underload variations. Why would we underload or overload something? What are the standard lifts? We're going to just go ahead and jump right into it. So if you've ever worked with barbells before, if you've ever run a program, or if you've watched anything that I've done, you've probably noticed that I squat a lot, and I have anybody that works with me squat a lot. We also bench press, overhead press, and we deadlift all the time. There's a reason for that. These are the absolutely key foundational movements to a lifter, to your human body. You pick stuff up, you squat down, you push stuff away from you, and you push things overhead. That's what you do if you're a human. That's what you do if you have two arms and two legs. And hell, if you have, I don't care if you have legs or not, you're going to push stuff away from you. So any of these movements, when we work with them using a barbell, we're going to use the most effective range of motion when we do our standard variation. When you put a barbell on your back and you squat, you're taking that barbell from, say, 5.5 feet in the air all the way down to 2.5 feet in the air. You're moving it through 3 solid feet. Even if you're a shorter person, you're moving it through 3 whole feet of space, down and then back up. And you're doing it with a lot of weight. It uses a lot of muscle mass, and that's the biggest reason why we use it. We can train it, we can get it strong, and we can use your entire body. There are no relaxed muscles under a heavy squat. However, your standard variations aren't going to work forever. At some point, squatting every day, max effort, it's going to suck. It's going to beat you up. Your muscles might not recover. You got to let your ligaments and your tendons kind of come back and heal up. So we move things around and say, all right, instead of squatting heavy 3 times a week, we're going to squat heavy once. We might bench press heavy once or twice. Same with the overhead press. And we might deadlift heavy once every week or 2. Some people don't even deadlift heavy more than once every 2 weeks. When we get to that point, we'll start throwing in underload variations or overload variations so that we can give a specific movement pattern an appropriate amount of work, an appropriate amount of stress, so that you, on the one hand, are stressed enough to improve, so that the stress creates an adaptation, and on the other hand, so you're not so stressed that you can't, that you tear a muscle, that you damage a ligament, that you hurt something that you really don't want to hurt. Accidents happen, but we try to avoid them. So that's our standard variations: squat, bench, overhead press, deadlift. No point in digging too much into that. Overload variations. So like we said, these are going to be useful when recovery becomes a problem, because your standard variations alone, they're not enough. If you squat 3 times a week, you actually overstress yourself and injure yourself. But if you don't squat, you don't make progress. So what do? Well, we can overload or underload things. With an overload variation, this is going to be equal to or even more stressful than your standard variation. So a barbell squat, if you have an overload variation of a barbell squat, it's going to be heavier than your normal squat. It's going to take more muscle. It's going to be harder. And we're not going to do it for near as many reps because of that. A lot of times it'll use less range of motion, and depending on the movement, it might use more muscle mass. Now with a squat, there's not really a way to use more muscle mass than what you're using already, unless you're going from like a front squat to a back squat. But we can reduce range of motion, we can introduce chains, bands, things like that. It's all stuff we don't need to get into the details, but that's what you need to take away from this. Less range of motion, heavier weights, fewer reps. Moving on, underload variations. When you are worn out because you've done your heavy work and you do need to do some more squat work, but you don't need it to be quite as heavy, we can throw some underload variations in there. Now, these are going to use a greater range of motion if possible. Greater range of motion inevitably is going to mean more work done, more weight lifted as a whole. It's going to feel like more weight lifted. 100 pounds moved 2 feet is more than 150 pounds moved 3 inches. That sort of concept. And it's probably going to use less muscle mass. Because of that, we're going to use lighter weights, and we're going to do a lot more repetitions. This is really important when we're trying to add work to a program without overstressing a lifter. So here's a couple quick slide, just some basic examples of the basic lifts and overload and underload variations. So in the middle here we got our standard back squat, bench press, overhead press. I have SS style here. I started out in starting strength, and when I teach people to overhead press, I have them do the overhead press in the starting strength style, unless there's a reason not to. So that's my standard. And then the last one, deadlift. Now for an overload variation on any of these, for a squat, we might take the same back squat you're used to doing, and we'll put a couple of chains, one on either side of the barbell, maybe a couple of bands tied to the floor. Makes it to where even though you're squatting, say, 300 pounds, at the bottom it might only be 300 pounds because there's no resistance added by the band or added by the chain. But at the top, because you're stretching that chain or stretching the band, or you're lifting the entire chain up, it's maybe 350 pounds. So that's how we overload the squat. You do more work. So you might do real heavy squats one day, and suppose you have a day you do some chain squats, you do, I don't know, 3 triples, real heavy with chains on them, or something along those legs, something along those legs. And you come back a couple days later, well, you're still a little sore, you're still kind of fatigued from doing your heavy work. Well, now you're going to do a lighter variant of the squat. Now you can do something like a front squat, maybe a tempo squat, a paused squat, or a boxed squat. Any of these variations on that movement are going to use a little bit less weight. They are probably going to maintain a similar range of motion when it comes to the squat, but they're less stressful overall, and they can allow you to vary things depending on what's hurting or if you need to give something a break. So the typical low bar back squat, for example, if you have issues with your hips and it gets to where it's just kind of hurting your hips after a couple of days, or shoulders, if it's hurting your shoulders after a couple of days, you can do higher squats. You can do a high bar paused squats, another underload variation, or you can do a front squat. It's going to be less weight. It's going to utilize the muscle mass a little bit differently, but it's going to allow you to get some really good work in, really feel the burn, and continue to make progress without smoking yourself, while giving other muscles that need to have a little bit of rest the rest that they need. Excuse me. Alright, bench press. Standard bench press is just that, the standard bench press, the one everybody knows, lying on your back, feet on the floor, and you press the bar down to the chest and press it up. Now, if you need to add some weight, you want to overload that movement a bit. Maybe you're having issues with lockout at the top. You're having issues with that top section of the lift. You can work with a floor press. There you're going to be dropping down, and because your back is on the floor, as soon as your elbows touch the floor, you've got to reverse. You can't go all the way down to the chest. It reduces that range of motion, and it allows you to lift more weight. Decline bench is kind of similar. It reduces the range of motion a bit, but it also places the bar at a more advantageous position relative to your pec insertion, so that you're going to have a greater ability to push weight. On the other hand, maybe you did your heavy bench on Monday, you come in on Tuesday, you do something else, and on Wednesday, whatever day it is, you need to have another bench press workout, but it doesn't need to be quite as heavy. Well, assuming your shoulders allow for it, you can do something like a close grip bench press for higher reps. It's going to be lighter weight. If your normal bench is 225, and for your floor press you do, say, 255, this close grip might only be 205 or 215, but it's going to be done for more reps. And that gives you the ability to continue to work the muscles, work the pectoralis, the pecs in a different way, work your triceps in a different way. So you can still get movement, you can still get work, and you don't smoke your shoulders or hurt anything. Alright, going back to overhead press. Like I said, this is the starting strength overhead press that allows for a little bit of hip bump. If you need to overload that, suppose you get your overhead press to 185. You can't move it, you just can't seem to get past 185, but you need to continue practicing that lockout overhead and balancing the bar. We might introduce a push press. That's going to allow you to dip down with your entire body a little bit and use your quads to drive that bar higher. You'll be able to practice the lockout position of the overhead press with heavier weights, or even with the same 185 pounds for a lot more repetitions. Another overload variation that I don't have listed here is a pin press, where you would set pins about forehead height on your power rack, stand inside, and overhead press from there to lock out. Now, if you have another day where you need to be doing a little bit less, a little bit lighter weight, or you want to build muscle mass and add work, if you want to add work to your overhead press workout, but you're all tired, you're all smoked, your shoulders are hurting, or there's some reason why you don't want to do the starting strength press, you could introduce a strict press or a dumbbell press. Another one that I personally like is the behind the neck press. I've always found that it really gets the muscles lit up with a lot less weight. It's good for a day when I'm feeling kind of sore, I really feel the need to move, and I want to get a good pump, a good amount of work, but I'm not interested in slinging around super heavy weights. All right, so last one, deadlift. Just like with the other three lifts, you'll have an overload variation. For the deadlifts, I like rack pulls and I like haltings. Rack pull, you're going to set your pins to where the barbell's resting just a little bit below the swell, the bottom of the knee, and you'll pull from there and lock out at extension. Standard deadlift width grip, and you'll be using heavier weight. Again, so if your deadlift is, say, 300 pounds or 350 pounds, your rack pull might be 400 or 405. Halting, same thing, except instead of starting on the rack, you're actually going to pull a halting deadlift from the floor, and when it hits just above the knee, you're going to go ahead and drop it back down. So if those are your overload variations, suppose you use those on a Monday or a Friday, you take a few days off from pulling, and you are coming back in, you need to do some more pulling work, but you really know you can't recover from heavy rack pulls again. Now you'll throw in maybe stiff leg deadlift or Romanian deadlift. Both of these will be done for less weight than even your normal deadlift, but they'll be done for multiple sets, higher reps, etc. You also can throw in something like the power clean, especially if your deadlift position, if you feel like that needs practice and you need to work on exploding, pulling off the floor quickly. I love power cleans when that's appropriate. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarification on underload and overload variations, and maybe a little bit of insight as to why we use the lifts we do. Questions are always welcome. Leave them down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.